Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm your host, Greg Martin. You know, a lot of divers today wound up getting excited about the learning experience of diving after browsing through magazines. Some of those wonderful underwater shots of moray eels and manta rays and starfish and so many more came from a gentleman named Stephen Frink. Now, I got my first taste of Stephen Frink through the pages of Skin Diver magazine, and now he's the publisher of Alert Diver, which is the official publication of the Divers Alert Network, or DAN for those of us inside the business. He's been an integral part of showing the world what the rest of us as divers see on a regular basis. So, Stephen, thanks for joining us this morning, and appreciate the fact of you giving us all those great images.
My pleasure, Greg. Thanks for remembering the old days with Skin Diver and beyond.
So what brings a Midwest boy to Florida to take pictures of the little fishies?
Well, you know, every fork in the road leads you to the next one, and I guess mine began in a swimming pool as a competitive swimmer. So that's what I did in the Midwest growing up, and, you know, I was very engaged with all things that had to do with the water, but there wasn't a lot of opportunity for me there other than the Mississippi River. It turned out that I went to graduate school in California, and, of course, there I did have an ocean, but I wasn't much inclined to get into it at the start, and then I got a part-time job cleaning yacht hulls, and they said they would hire me so long as I got certified. So, okay, now I can swim. Now I'm certified as a scuba diver, but I'm still not taking pictures. But right about that time, I was in graduate school doing a course in experimental psychology, and I had wrapped all the coursework, but I still had spare time while I was working on my thesis, and I just took a photo class for fun. And I think that was my ruination. I saw the image come up in a tray of Dectal, black and white picture, and I was hooked. I guess the symbiosis of those three elements, you know, competitive swimmer, beginning scuba diver, and now highly enthused photo person.
So take all those things, roll them together, marry them together, and you wind up with Stephen Frink Photography. And it's been how many years now? I
got out of graduate school in 1974, so I bounced around a little bit, went to Hawaii and got a part-time job photographing drunk tourists at night at the luau's, and I would go scuba diving during the day. So there was a little bit of time there. Actually, I got to say, I dropped out of scuba diving. Again, photography was, I guess, the greater muse. And I moved to Colorado, got a job as a darkroom technician, and I just wanted to be around nature. So I lived outside Denver in the mountains and drove into town every day and worked in a darkroom, and probably would have stayed out of the sport. A buddy of mine from the swim team moved to Key Largo, and he was going to be a treasure diver. In the late 70s, there were people trying to make a living with treasure diving, and he was one of them. So I came to Key Largo just on holiday to visit my old swim buddy. And I looked around the town and I saw, well, golly, look at all these divers that are coming to Pennicamp Park. And maybe there's a chance that some of them would like to have their E6 film processed, and maybe might be some others that would like to rent a camera. So that was my original hook. I thought, all right, if there's 500,000 people a year that are coming to Pennicamp Park, probably 100,000 of them are going to want to take pictures. And if there's 100,000 going to take pictures, then 50,000 ought to want to come to my place and spend $6 a head. So it didn't work out like that at all. But that was the fantasy that brought me to Key Largo.
What is it with our math? You know, when we're young, we look at our math and you know, that's what I always thought about the radio business. I always figured, you know, there's all these listeners out there. Everybody send me $1, I wouldn't have to work ever again. But it just never quite worked out that way.
I think I was just lucky that they paid me so poorly being a darkroom technician, so renting a couple cameras a week wasn't so bad in retrospect.
Talk a little bit about what it takes in your mind to make a good photo. I mean, people take a lot of pictures every year and they think they've got a winning picture, but it doesn't always happen that way, does it?
No, it doesn't happen that way, and it takes a while to get to the point where you're consistently getting good pictures. I think it's quite a bit easier now with the instant gratification from digital photography, but you think about the things that refine your vision, let alone your skill set. For my situation, I guess a lot of my images are commercial in the sense that we're telling the story of a dive destination, or perhaps illustrating dive equipment, or, you know, there tends to be some specific form of communication that I'm trying to do with a photograph. Other people may find that it's quite enough to see something beautiful on the coral reef and to try to render it in the best way possible, so that their friends on Facebook are entertained, or whatever the point of the photograph is. I think it all drills down to communication. Now, you're talking about you only were diving in ponds and there wasn't much to see. And I guess if it weren't for people sending me other places where there was a lot to see, I might not have got beyond that either, because, it costs a lot of money to go to these places. But early on, magazines kind of resonated with my business plan. I got sent on an assignment to Cayman, right, probably only a year after I started doing business. And it was only, I guess, because they believed in my Yellow Pages ad or something like that, because I surely wasn't much of a shooter. But you learn, that I came home from the first assignment, and I saw the images that they liked. I saw the images that they put on the pages. And I remember my editor telling me the color sells, just a simple thing like that. Those kind of refine your vision. I think about those very early years, and I think there were two schools of underwater photography when I first started. There was the Chris Newbert School of Underwater Photography, and that had to do with taking pictures of fish and maybe seeing a fish in a way that nobody ever saw it before. And there was the Rick Fracey School of Underwater Photography, who was a brilliant wide-angle photographer, and he would have beautiful people in the ocean. Not that he didn't shoot fish as well, but he tended to show people in an environment so that on the pages of a magazine you could relate. You could say, well, geez, if this person is there and this is what the coral reef looks like, if I go, I can see the same things. So I think it's a big way. A big part of it is how you're reinforced. I was getting reinforcement from the dive magazines of the day to tell a story about a destination, and I think that helped refine my vision. Other people might get their reinforcement a different way. If it's the consensual validation of social media, golly, maybe if they're better able to get a tight headshot on a pygmy seahorse, and nobody's ever seen that perspective before, maybe that's how they drill down. Maybe that's their vision.
Sure. It is interesting that you've gone the kind of the gamut here from Skin Diver magazine to now kind of an industry specific magazine with Alert Diver. What kind of challenges do you have trying to produce something? It's quarterly, right? It
is quarterly, and actually that's I think the beauty of what we do, because we have time to let the ideas percolate, to try to get the very best photography, to get the best paper. We bring the paper in from France. We've sourced the best possible paper we can get. We use soy inks, and we get the paper from a managed forestry. These are the kind of things that we can do because we have the luxury of time. We're only doing this magazine 4 times a year, and I'm very grateful that we have passionate advertisers that help us support our mission in terms of communicating this. Greg, I don't mean this as a commercial, but I think that people don't understand how large a magazine Alert Diver is. It's like an order of magnitude bigger in terms of circulation than any of the other magazines, because the Divers Alert Network has 250,000 members. A big magazine in Europe might be 20,000. A big magazine in the United States might be 80,000. We print 150,000 issues, and the difference between 250 and 150 is because we only send one per household, and we have a lot of family members. But the point is, because the scale is so large, we can do things in a little different way.
I have to say this, Stephen, okay? I don't just look at the pictures, I do read the magazine. Now, I tried that on my mom once, and it didn't work.
Yeah, but you were reading Playboy at the time.
Wonderful content in Alert Diver, and yes, there are wonderful pictures. There isn't a fold out, but that's a whole nother story there. So before I let you go, I want to ask one more question, and that is in regards to the diving aspect of this. We do know that as we progress in the dive industry, we have more experience, we get more comfortable. But as a photographer, you have to be extremely comfortable with your skills to be able to hover. Your buoyancy control is so important. Talk a little bit about your experience that way.
Well, the buoyancy control and all that is, of course, important. But I think the thing that I guess brought me to the whole Alert Diver project to begin with was having been bent. And I think I owe that totally to underwater photography because, I mean, it was just so compelling and I was so passionate about it that, I would stay longer than I should. And I was actually indifferent to a lot of the dive tables back at the time. And when we finally got computers to use, if the computer told me I could stay down another 3 minutes and I had 6 shots left to go, well, I would go for it. I'd run it to the bitter end. And the first time I got bent was far away. I was in Vanuatu, and I had to call up on a single sideband radio and try to get help. And the people I talked to were Dan. I know that's not the question you asked, but I think that's one of the things that an underwater photographer has to be cognizant of is there are things perhaps more important than just photography once you're underwater. But the other thing, the coral reef preservation is certainly important. It used to be, golly, some of the places we would dive had so much coral. I remember the mindset early on, the underwater photographers would take pictures of people puffing up pufferfish or riding turtles or, a beautiful stand of elkhorn. You'd come by after a bunch of photographers went through and you'd see broken off elkhorn corals and things of that nature. So photographers in general got a pretty bad rap. But that was kind of, I don't know, maybe that was in the 90s. I don't see that from photographers near as much. I think they're really sensitive about it. They're not all, mind you, but I think the people who've done it long enough, have seen what's happening to our coral reefs, realize that we can't spare any coral. We can't spare any harm to our marine life. We have to communicate, back to the communication again, we have to communicate concern and care for what has become a very finite resource. So our images have to be respectful of the coral reef, and so do our actions. I just don't believe that underwater photographers are as ignorant of coral reef issues as they might have been at one time. I think now we're part of the solution, not the problem, I hope.
I want to thank you for the time today to talk about your background, your current projects, and so forth. And as always, I'll look forward to my next issue of Alert Diver. Stephen, thanks so much.
All right, Greg. Thanks so much. I appreciate the call. All
right. And if you have an interest in learning how to take some great photography, be sure and check out your local NAUI dive shop or check out NAUI.org. And that's this episode of NAUI's Dive Team Report. I'm Greg Martin. Thanks for listening. I'll see you underwater.